Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Progressively Incorrect. My name is Zach Groshell. I'm so excited to be talking about a topic that has never appeared on Progressively Incorrect before, and that is Montessori. I personally attended a Montessori preschool and I haven't really thought about what it means to be a Montessori school. And so I decided to invite two of the absolute leading experts, Matt Bateman and Laura Mazer, onto the podcast to kind of talk about what it really is. Because I feel like I have some misconceptions, and we'll talk about what my latest experience has been with their school, Montessorium, in Austin, Texas, during this episode. Before we jump into my interview with my guests, I just wanted to plug the Explicit Teaching Institute, which is happening in July 2026 in New York City. Do you like New York City? Can you convince your school to send you out for a week-long training where we're going to do lots of active practice and rehearsal, and it's going to be really fun, and we'll have happy hour on Thursday? Then go to the show notes of this episode and send them the Eventbrite and be like, look, this is the cheapest ticket in town, and we get to go and learn a lot about this methodology. I'll be leading it. It'll be a blast. Tickets are selling very, very quickly, though. So go check out the show notes, and I'd love to see you at the Explicit Teaching Institute. Laura and Matt, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Let's start with some introductions. I'll just jump over to you, Matt. Seems fair. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am a philosopher. I have a PhD in philosophy and used to be a philosophy professor. So about 12 years ago, I totally switched careers and got sucked into the world of education startups, and in particular, Montessori. I mean, I have some background in child development and children and early childhood education, but I just 12 years ago, I saw Montessori for the first time, a really good Montessori classroom, and fell in love with it. And I've been reading her work and arguing about it and writing about it and creating school models ever since. That's most of what I've done. And the latest thing that I'm doing is I am working for Alpha School, and part of that is kickstarting a Montessori version of Alpha. So we can talk about that.
And Laura, over to you.
Yeah, hey Zach. So I similarly have had a major career pivot. I started my life in medicine, so I was actually a practicing general surgeon for a minute, and a medical educator before transitioning to ever younger students. And about 5 years ago, I guess, made a pretty major career shift to focus entirely on education. Initially, that was with Guidepost Montessori. So similar to Matt, I'd sort of done a little work actually applying Montessori pedagogy to surgical training in my research days, and really fell in love and had the opportunity to dive into elementary and adolescent programming with Guidepost. And then more recently have pivoted, similar to Matt, to the Alpha School Network, where I am running and really developing the Montessorium model, which is bringing technology into a more traditional Montessori elementary classroom.
Love it. And I'll just go to say that I was able to visit Montessorium. So a lot of what we'll talk about today is some of the things I saw, some of the things I was really impressed with. But I kind of wanted to lead with this question. If I ever type into Twitter like I'm sending my kid to Montessori or whatever, I think it would immediately get some level of backlash from folks that like really believe in kind of like structured forms of learning. And so when people usually hear Montessori, they kind of imagine maybe like total freedom, kids are constantly playing, really doing whatever they want. And that's not that's not what I saw when I visited your school. And so I kind of wanted to put this over to you and maybe give you a chance to kind of unpack that. What does freedom actually mean in a real Montessori classroom? What does a lesson look like, or what does instruction look like? I'm very curious about that. Laura, I think as you're in the classroom constantly, maybe you're perfectly positioned to answer that.
Yeah, and it is the most common concern I get from parents, I think, or a very common concern I get from parents going into Montessori Elementary in particular, where even the parents who were very pro-freedom for their 3-year-old are starting to think, but also I really want them to learn math. And the way they'll often phrase it for me is, I understand that more Montessori is child-led and all about following the child. but my child only likes Legos. My child will never lead you to the math shelf. My child will never do writing. How can you sort of reconcile this seeming conflict? And I think the misconception that I always point out is we are not destination agnostic. It is not as though we do not care where we're going and we will follow the child on any journey. We're actually really explicit on what we want to see as the outcomes of the educational process. So we know where we're going. Every child may take a different path to get there. So what we can do in a Montessori classroom is a really individualized learning structure. So we present material differently. We present it for a different length of time. We do a different amount of repetitive practice, a different type of repetitive practice. But everybody's getting through the classroom knowing their math facts and having mastered, reading comprehension and grammar, and in fact, a lot more formal grammar than is done in most traditional schools today. So I think the biggest thing I tell parents to start with is we know where we're headed. The destination is firmly in mind. What we work collaboratively with parents, but honestly with children to figure out is how are we going to get there?
Love it. And so, if I can tell you, I don't know if you noticed from my body language when I first visited. I came in a kind of like that a very stilted, like I just felt like I wasn't meant to belong in this school, and I was already very skeptical about the whole thing. I'd visited the other Alpha schools just previously, and this was kind of at the end of our visit, and with like Carl Hendrick and a bunch of other folks. And I was like, this is not going to be the one. I came away going, no, this is the one. Like, this is the one I'm sending my daughter to. Like, this is the school. I think it had a lot to do with I guess the presentation style on the carpet for me. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Maybe Matt, you mentioned like kind of what a lesson kind of looks like, and I know there's sort of an aesthetic to it that I was really actually drawn to.
Yeah, so I mean, Montessori lessons, pretty much at all ages, certainly in elementary and children's house, have a kind of format where a work mat is laid out. Sometimes you can use a table, depending on what you're doing, but a work mat is laid out on the floor. So like a kind of bamboo rug is unrolled, and specific learning materials are taken from the shelf, and there's a lot of history and opinion about the nature of these learning materials and what should and shouldn't be allowed in the classroom. This is not like like, oh, I found this cool thing on Teachers Pay Teachers or Amazon or whatever, and like we're adding this. It's like usually, not always, but usually going to be some like storied, time tested, kind of very, very pressure tested, 100 years of pressure testing material, like a math material, like the Stamp Game, which is a collection of materials that show have a bunch of different stamps that represent different numerals at different place values, and also some other materials like Skittles, little divisor things that you can use division and kind of represent the different quantities being divided. Um, and then the teacher gives a lesson on how to use these materials. Now, the nature of that lesson can vary depending on exactly where the student is, but the lesson is pretty scripted. Like when you get Montessori training, you literally get a script and practice on the script. Depending on the lesson and kind of what age you're at, it can be scripted down to the level of, depending on your training, it can be scripted down to the level of sit here and use your right hand to do this and use these words and don't use these words. And like, like it's like an art. And most Montessori teachers love this. Like they don't, it's not like, oh my gosh, like I'm a robot. Like you're being asked to kind of master something. And it's not like there's no room for variation or responsiveness within that, but that's the kind of backbone of it. And I mean, the lessons are of the nature of like, here is how you use the material. Here is what we are doing. Here are specific questions that will motivate you and kind of help you understand this. Here are specific examples that I'm going to work through. And I think an explicit instruction, the kind of worked example in learning science, like there's tons of worked examples in Montessori. I mean, this kind of gets to other kinds of, progressive education misconceptions about Montessori. Like it is extremely explicit instruction. It doesn't look like EDI. It doesn't look like kind of like group. Usually these are individual lessons, 1 to 3 children, working with a teacher. So it doesn't look like the kind of like, I mean, we don't even have this in the US, but in like, I mean, like you see in like England, kind of like call and response between like a good teacher and the entire group where they're all kind of like chanting a lesson back and forth. It doesn't look anything like that. But it is very explicit instruction using a material, a hands-on material that the child learns how to use and then goes on to manipulate. And the task for the child is to demonstrate that they can use it in the lesson and then to go and do follow-up work, which is typically like, for the stamp game, like do the following division problems. We're going to make some division problems for you to do, and you will use the material to do these problems, and you will record your answers in the book. And then you can check the answers, another student can check the answers, the teacher can check the answers, and that's the follow-up work. So that's one example, but I mean, that is paradigmatic. Like it's not like this is a freak outlier. This is what Montessori instruction looks like. And you might get like, a couple of lessons a day, have a lot of follow-up work. There's hundreds of lessons to get through over the course of a 3 or 6 year program. And this is all just default Montessori, not kind of anything special that we're doing at Montessori. But yeah, that's the basic look.
And it seems like all of this has to be really tightly related to like active observation of student work, like what they're saying, what they're doing, what like and that's one of the things that I actually was just like kind of blown away with was like I was watching one of the lessons on the carpet and the teacher was building off of like there was a learning history that the teacher has understands in a very very deep way. I sort of realize I take for granted as a teacher like how serious it is to like to watch and observe what students are doing. You can kind of skip through it. You start maybe just me a little just get a little bit lazy or start to blow things off, but there's like this real like almost scientific approach to what you're doing there. Maybe Laura you could speak to that.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the first things we teach in Montessori teacher training is the nature of observation, the nature of scientific observation, and the importance of observing the children. Everything about the lessons you give and how you give the lessons and when you're ready to move on to the next lesson is based on observation. And so you will see a lot of observation by the guides in the classroom. I'll also say it is the most challenging part of Montessori elementary in particular. When you move from children's house, which is usually ages like 3 to 6, into elementary, which is ages 6 to 12, Montessori becomes much more complex. The curriculum becomes much more complex. What we ask of the classroom becomes much more complex. There are like 4 areas of a Montessori Children's House classroom. A Montessori guide who goes through Children's House training learns and memorizes, like Matt was saying, about 800 lessons. That's an amazing amount. You move to elementary, and there are, depending on who you ask, 10 to 12 areas of the classroom. There are thousands of lessons, and that's incomplete. It's a mixed age classroom that covers everything from introductory phonics to I have a student who just started pre-algebra and more, right? And all of these things to create a completely individualized learning path, you're absolutely right. The amount of observation the adult in the room has to do, not just to be able to do the initial lesson presentation, but the lesson itself is the tip of the iceberg. The iceberg, the underneath, the hopefully seen but often unseen, is the follow-up work. You can present Stamp Game to a child, but then they have to work with Stamp Game enough that they are very, very confident. And you have to have enough observations to not just know, okay, I looked at their follow-up work and I saw they got the answers right. But do they understand the mechanics? Do they understand the concept? Do they know why they're doing this? Because the step after Stamp Game division is a progression to abstraction where they can do the problem without the material. And that relies on both conceptual understanding, procedural fluency, facts practice. So how can you observe enough to know they're blocked? Why are they blocked? What do they need represented? Or what sort of underlying skill do they actually need to go back to, or they've mastered it and they're ready to move on? And I will say for us, the biggest value of what's sort of unique in the Montessorium classroom is bringing in the Time Back or 2 Hour Learning suite of apps. And really what it's done is it's given us 20 more pairs of eyes in the classroom. It's really just a ton of observational data that lets our guides create those targeted learning plans in a way that would simply be impossible for one adult to do if they didn't have that sort of backup of technology driven data gathering.
That's so interesting. So for folks who haven't heard of this model, I think I'll try to unpack it, and if you can help me, I full disclosure, I design a lot of these apps, so I know what they do and stuff. So what I'm hearing is like in a typical Montessori classroom, right? You really do have to rely on the teacher as the single set of eyes. Of course, that means like circulating very rigorously. That means getting, over the shoulder listening and a lot of, probably journaling and data collection. But then this 2 hour learning model or time back model is a series of apps that really focuses on foundational skills that kids need to master in a sort of a mastery based sequence. I guess everybody already is like, wait, I didn't even know Montessori had teaching in it, right? Like if anyone's it had that misconception, and now you're bringing in, I thought that Montessori would reject any sort of tech based Silicon Valley sounding type of thing. Can you unpack that for me? I'm very curious. Matt, maybe over to you. Like, what is this interaction between these two different methods?
I mean, I think you need to kind of reset your view and step back to make it all fit together. So if you're kind of coming in like, I have this idea of traditional teaching and Montessori is opposed to that, and then there's ed tech, like it's going to be hard to square. But it actually, from first principles, makes a lot of sense. So some things we've already talked about, or alluded to at least. Montessori's view is that what elevates children and what schools should be focused on and what childhood should be focused on is children working. And I mean, this gets back to the misconceptions issue. There's a widely attributed quote to Montessori, which is play is the work of the child. She never said that. She never would have said that. She contrasted work with play. She wasn't opposed to play, but she thought that work was developmentally central, purposeful. You're doing something real. You're concentrating for a long time. You have a goal. It takes you steps to get there. You might fail. Like children want to do real things and need to do real things, and school should be set up to replicate this. In Children's House, and especially in the elementary years, that work is knowledge work. So what it is to be an elementary child is to be a generalist, to be generally curious about the world and to want to know more about it. You've reached what people in a different time would have called the age of reason. What developmental psychologists have different terms for this, but something happens around the time when you're 5 or 6 or 7, and you become much more capable of explanations and abstract thought. And so the work of the child is knowledge work. It's coming to understand and think about that. So this is the kind of basic premise of Montessori education is how can we set the child up to actually do this work, to scaffold this work? What in the environment can we set up so that the child is capable of doing this work? Like in the Montessori early childhood classroom, it's like we want to set up small tables and small snack trays so that they can do work to get snacks by themselves and to clean the dishes by themselves and to like actually meet their real needs. And for a 2-year-old, that's really freaking hard. That's like a 10-step process. For the elementary child, for like a 7-year-old, it's like, how do we set them up to actually understand long division, or mathematics generally, or something about history or anatomy, or Laura's done a bunch of great work with anatomy this year. I'm doing some work with history now. So there's the whole, all the disciplines kind of come in elementary, and the idea is that the elementary child is primed to learn about those things, which doesn't mean you prepare the environment, and here's another misconception in Montessori. It doesn't mean you prepare the environment and then you step away and the children go into the environment and they're just inspired to use everything. The teachers work to connect the child to the material. So the teacher's job is to say, I'm going to give you an inspired introduction to this, show you exactly how to use it, show you some examples, give you some follow-up work, and then we're going to make a plan together so that you will come in during the work period and do the follow-up work and get additional lessons and kind of participate in the process of this knowledge work and learning and mastery. I've kind of talked about the lesson structure where it's like mostly individual lessons. Laura's talked about the challenge and the solution of time back. So the kind of the basic unsolved problem of Montessori Elementary, just to restate what Laura said, is if you've got 20 students in a class, 25 students in a class, and you spend 10 minutes a day thinking about each student, that's most of your day. That's like 4 or 5 hours. I'd have to do the math. even if you're a great teacher, and we have a great teacher at Montessorium, we have two great teachers. We have a classroom that's like incredible. It's just so hard to kind of keep track of everything, and especially not just to give lessons, but to like ensure that follow through and to ensure that it's done thoughtfully. And so, what Montessori thought is you prepare an environment and you connect the child to the environment. And what we can do in 2026 and with the Alpha School platform is you can say, let's add a laptop to that environment. In addition to there being a million cube and a stamp game and grammar boxes and a history shelf with all sorts of great hands-on materials and lessons, we can also say, here is a laptop. And this laptop will let you practice something to mastery. And not only will it let you practice something to mastery, the laptop is a sophisticated silicon thing that will have an opinion as to whether or not you have mastered something. And in 2026, especially, we can connect it to up to a mainframe that has some, simulacrum of intelligence that can watch the student work, which is what the Alpha AI system does, and develop a second or third opinion over and above what the app does, literally by analyzing video and analyzing kind of real-time video and lots of screenshots of the student working and of their screen and things like that, of like, is the child even paying attention? The kind of basic things that a proctor would notice. Is the child even paying attention? How motivated are they? How engaged are they? What kinds of errors are they making if they're stuck on something? Do they need to kind of like go back? Can we recommend that? Can we assign a different lesson within the app? Can we give a summary to the child's teachers that kind of indicates what's going on or what the motivational issues are? All connects to the system of students want to work, students need to work. Montessori Elementary is about providing a certain kind of context for knowledge work where the student can really run and actually do it, which means doing it to mastery. There's a tremendous amount of individualization that needs to happen there. And the toolkit of the teacher should be everything under the sun, like everything good. Like you want all the power tools, which for us at Montessorium is the time-tested Montessori curriculum and the newfangled AI-powered tech platform, but they all work together in the same framework. So you never want to put words in the mouths of great dead thinkers, but like Montessori like was interested in like films and video and the kind of like cutting edge technology of her day, she died in 1952. It's very hard for me to imagine like Montessorians like not excited about things like modern technology and the internet and YouTube and AI and whatnot to kind of like be additional things in the environment that you then test and that pedagogues like go in and they're like, this is what's working, this is what's not. The goal is real work. The goal is not play or slop or time wasting. The goal is like knowledge and work and real effort and something that adds up to the child being onboarded into civilization. Use the tools that you have to do that, and that's what we're trying to do.
Awesome. I guess I have a lot of questions about it because my daughter, which the folks that are on here know her name is June. She's even had a few recordings on here that people talk about. She has typically been just like that experience of like a high performing student in a public school and being like super bored. Like she's had that experience, and everybody tells me just chill out. You're an educator, so you know too much. You know what it should be like, and so when you go and observe stuff, you're super stressed when it's like mediocre, or when she comes home every day saying, I'm just not learning much, and you realize that much of their learning just has to occur in a structured way at home, which is taking away that precious time with the family, right? And that's what I've been going through for the past 2 years of education. And so Montessorium is a mixed age classroom, and it has the time back platform, which could ensure a layer of individualization that is very one to one. And it's blending the Montessori traditional model, especially like I guess afternoon times. I'd love to hear more about that. What can this model do for kids who are in the same situation as June? They're just bored, or they just don't. They're starting to not really get what the point of all of this is, which is what I feel like is how she tells it to me. Maybe Laura can answer that one.
Yeah, I have the opposite reaction to the people who are telling you to chill out. I mean, I would say that's an emergency. That's the elementary emergency. Montessori, a lot of what she left us for elementary is her developmental psychology, and she sort of talks about the difference between that child in the first plane of development, 3 to 6, and then into the second plane of development, that age of reason that Matt mentioned, and what the driving need of that new child is. Um, when we look at like a toddler, a young child, Montessori talks about the driving need of that developmental plane being physical independence. And anyone who's interacted with a toddler has had the experience of preventing that child from doing some physical task they really want to do that day, right? Like try and get your toddler out of the house when they are trying to put on their shoes, and it's really important to them that they be the one to get dressed or they be the one to push the elevator button, and they're going to melt down when you deny them what their entire being is telling them is the most important thing for them to do. They have a tantrum and they scream and they melt down. And even though it can be very frustrating and you don't always have time for it, they're telling you as loudly as they can, I need this. I need space and time and environment and curriculum to help me develop my physical ability to master my own body. The elementary child has a different driving need, and it is intellectual independence, according to Montessori. The need is just as intense. The sort of drive to explore what their minds are capable of is just as intense, but the response when it's denied is very different. Especially in girls, we see sort of more commonly, they don't melt down. They don't have the tantrums. Some do, but most don't. It's a quieter age. Um, they get quiet. Maybe they come home and they complain that they're bored, and maybe they just stop trying. But it should scream to us as loudly as the tantrum does that the most important need of this developmental plane is not being met. And that should feel a little bit heartbreaking. And so we want in our classroom to be giving them all of the opportunities to grow. There is no ceiling to what they can do. There is only support. And so, the beauty of the mixed stage classroom, every child is at a different level in every subject. They are at a different level academically than they are socially. We have children who are 6 by age operating at a 9 or a 10-year-old level in reading, a 7-year-old level in math, and maybe a 4-year-old level in their social interactions. And the classroom meets them where they are in every place. We have literature circles. So all of our students who are capable of reading, even some of our students who aren't yet reading, are doing a literature circle with an older student reading to them. And so they start chapter books as soon as they join the classroom. Matt's daughter, who's 6, was in a literature circle with an 8-year-old because they were both ready for the same book and they both brought different things to the discussion of plot or theme. So they actually just finished A Little Princess and now they're moving on to Half Magic, I think Alice is reading now. But yeah, I always have the opposite reaction because I think so many of us went through a mediocre education system and we look at ourselves and we say, well, I'm not unhappy with my life. I'm doing pretty good. Like it must have been fine. And so we have this sense that it's not emergent or we shouldn't be worried about this period of time not being ideal. And, obviously I'm an elementary educator, so I'm biased, but I come very strongly down on the opposite of this time should feel urgent. It is the moment where you decide you love learning or you don't. You decide you're capable of learning or you're not. You decide the world is interesting or it's not. And you can spend your 20s trying to make up for the conclusions of your elementary years, or you can spend your 20s cashing in on having built that solid foundation.
Yeah, if I could just add, I like the alternation that you have going between Laura and I, but my daughter is like Alice is like June. She's 6 and she's very bright, at least in some dimensions, like kind of off the charts, and in other dimensions more ordinary, and that kind of individualization is nice. But like sometimes she's never been to a public school. Like I've spent, half my career designing schools for her in one way or another, directly or indirectly. And I mean, Montessori, like I'm very hard to please, by the way. Like a lot of the schools that I have designed do not please me, and it's a huge credit to the Montessorian team how happy I am with her education this year. She's a hard case. But there's two things. One is if you chill out, like if you're spending, let's just say a few hours each day learning, like really learning, like however many total hours you're spending kind of during the day, kind of learning at random, but like a few hours a day systematically learning, like, are you wasting that time or not? And if you're wasting that time, how much, like what percentage of it is wasted? Like 10% or 90%? And for how long is it wasted? Is it wasted for like a month or years? I do think that that adds up to the kind of like conceptual facility of the child and the knowledge base of the child. But even if you say they're going to forget all that anyway, which I don't think, but like even if you kind of say like that's not important, they can catch up later, chill out. What Laura was just talking about, the conclusions that you draw at this age, like the relationship that you have to effort, is effort worthwhile? What smart students will conclude is that everything is easy and I don't need to try. Like this is a common universal experience, and then you have to try to deprogram that later, and it's hard. You know, you could like even if you deprogram out, like you could kind of sort of struggle with it your entire life. Like this is something that I think has happened. If you're a below average student, you can also conclude that effort is not worthwhile because the class is going to move ahead, and they're not that good at teaching me, and I've already fallen off the bus, and like it's actually like a relatively not a small portion, it's a large portion of students, probably even a majority of students, but just like the average pace works for the average student, but human variance is immense. And if you have the tools and the methodology, I mean, some people don't think that we have the tools and the methodology to individualize and vary, but I definitely think that we do. It's crazy to think that we don't, or that we couldn't develop them, or that it would be too expensive or crazy. We've gone to the moon, like we can solve this problem. And I think we have it now. Like I think we've had it for 100 years, and we're getting better and better at it, if anything. Like, why would you not optimize for like that sweet spot of like you're challenged, you can do most of what's asked of you. It takes some effort. Some of what's asked of you you can't do, and it's like pushing the edge of your ability. And there's just this, the ideal is, I'm not even saying we always meet this ideal, but we try and we do a pretty good job. The ideal is there's just a kind of constant smooth progression of like hitting the world with the right amount of friction until you're out in the world on your own, and like the world is your friction, and like you don't need the artificial environment of the school, and like that's the service that we're providing, and your relationship to the world is then, wow, I can have so many goals and I can try and I can do things, which is exactly what you don't see in the culture at large. And I think that you just have to hold education accountable for a significant portion of it. That's what I think, and that's what Montessori thought. This is part of the point of children want to work, is that it's become so unnatural for us to think of work as like a desirable human capacity for virtue and something that you naturally want to do, that it's like hard for us to see it in children. And so we say instead that they want to play, but like just consistently getting a few hours of that optimal challenge, deep concentration, like people who say it doesn't make a difference, like I think they either don't understand it or they're just wrong. Yeah.
Even like just whatever school you put your child in is going to have a huge impact on even just the small micro behaviors that are maybe subtle, but they're real. Like let me explain. I just had my daughter in a school in Canada because we for my work she got to have like she got to spend some time in Canada, and in that school they focus a lot on having kids turning and talking to each other, and they have a routine of how to like take turns and like use my hands to be like, and over to you. And so just by the fact of that school making that decision, all the children turn and talk in this way, that I'm sure as you get older it can be less, it can be less artificial. It starts to become who you are. But my daughter goes into the school and I just watch her, and the teacher's, all right, turn and talk, like explain how does that work, and all the children whoosh turn and start talking, and she's sitting there just like, really, like, like do this, like talk and say, but that's a choice, that's a thing that happens there, that's a cultural thing, and it shapes who you are. And you also can go to see a school with laptops, and you can see kids not pursuing the worked example that's on the screen, slouching in their chair and just moaning and hating what they're doing. And the laptop's not the thing, right? It's the way we shape children's habits, and the way we talk to them about who they're becoming and their goals, and all of these things have such an impact. I think that one of the big pushbacks against the alpha model in general would be the kids are just going to be like wired up to these laptops. It's going to be super dystopian seeming. The kids are going to be like, ruined by screen time, I suppose. And it's really going to take away kind of the more authentic relationship building and like what it means to be a child by using these artificial kind of tools. Laura, like what would you say to such skepticism when it comes to how you guys use the tools?
Yeah, and we get that skepticism because, there is a group of people who pursue Montessori because they think it's anti-tech. The first slightly tongue-in-cheek response I'll say to anyone who thinks that is come see us. I'm sitting on campus today. It's picture day, and I'm sort of laughing as we're talking because I'm watching our kids. One of them is literally trying to do a headstand in our class photo right now. So they have very genuine connections to each other and to their incredible guides. But no, the first thing you have to see it to believe it. But I think part of what I want to see happen, and I think we are still in the process of developing, are tools where the divide between the physical and the digital tool does not feel so significant. And I think that's the march of progress, but it's also it's the best of all possible worlds, right? Like I don't like it when I see it in a student, and I don't like it when I see it in a teacher or a parent where there's work and then there's laptop work. There's I got to do laptop work, or I've got to do, like some other category of work. Whether you're working with the stamp game to practice division, or you're doing rounds of division problems that have a little video, that have all been inspired by some of the Montessori physical materials because it's so in the ethos of the history of math instruction, those are two avenues to the same goal. And so a lot of what I want to build is we use the same strategies. Sometimes I'll have parents ask me, well, what if my child just doesn't like the laptop work? Then they don't have to do it, right? And I say, well, what if they just don't like math? I wouldn't say they just don't have to do it. I observe. I say, why? Why is it that they're resistant to this style of working? Is it a lagging skill? Is it an unmet need? Is it it's too advanced? It's too easy? There's always a why. No healthy 7-year-old is presented with any work and says, I'm not into this. You can get a 7-year-old excited about literally anything. So if they are resistant to something, there's a why and there's a problem to solve. But I want the work to feel like work. And if they are doing nothing but stamp game all day, every day, there's a problem, right? And we don't usually see it with something like stamp game, but we do in a traditional Montessori elementary classroom have the child who just chooses to read. And at first glance, especially if you're in a classroom that's not sparking excitement, that could sound like an amazing problem. Your biggest problem is that your child wants to read all of the great books on the shelf all day. But that is a problem for us because then they're not doing the more effortful work. They're not advancing in all areas of the curriculum. They're not working on their grammar or their handwriting or their math skills. So I think mostly what I want to try and work towards, and I think this is we're getting there, and we need better apps, but we also need better hardware. I have a belief that has become stronger every day I've been in this classroom, that a big part of, the real need and development in ed tech is actually hardware, not software. But where we want to go is intentional work, lessons at the right level of challenge, delivered in the right style for this child, mixed methods in terms of live and digital and hands-on and conceptual, and all of it comes together. And there is not some fundamental and unresolvable distinction between work I do with a screen or work I do with technology or work that's tech enabled and work that I could have done 80, 90, 100 years ago.
Love it. I do feel like it's like sort of in the level of an experimental model at this point, right? Where and parents talking to parents at the parent night, it was that's sort of like what they signed up for. They're like, we're trying this out. We actually moved to this area to try this out because we believe in this. In terms of just the data, just the raw scores on achievement, like how's that been going?
Yeah, it's going well. So we use the NWEA MAP test as our standardized sort of measure of achievement. And again, we're new, we're small. This is year one, but we've gotten our mid-year data back so far. And on average, our students grew 3.5 times faster than their traditionally educated peers. And we saw the most growth in the students that had the farthest to come. But across the board, we saw pretty remarkable academic growth for basically all students in all subjects.
Well, that's great. We're gonna try this out. People that are interested in this particular model, they should follow up with y'all and they should check out the show notes and stuff that I'm gonna put a bunch of links in. But famously, I always forget to put those links in. So what would how could they get in contact with you and figure out more about this approach?
Yeah, reach out to either of us. Matt is certainly more online than I am, but I'm on various platforms. Montessorium.school is our website, which has an info form. We're on Instagram, we're on Twitter. Matt is very online, as he says in his bio. But reach out to either of us personally or through the website. If you are in Austin, come see it. Like it's just come see it. We have monthly open houses. We have a First Friday forum where all of our students present work and all of our families are there. And so, you can get a feel for the community. Just come say hi.
Can I also say, like, taking off my specific entrepreneurial and advocacy hat for Montessorium, which everybody should check out, and you should definitely enroll your elementary age child, and you should move to Austin to do that. 100%. You should do all of those things. While there are still spots, which there won't be for long. I mean, just on the topic of the podcast, if you have some kind of osmotically absorbed skepticism about Montessori, I would encourage you to take a second look. Like, really just be curious about it. And my motivation, my kind of pitch to you is, if you like structure and learning, if you like knowledge, if you like explicit structure, not necessarily if you're a traditionalist, like it does look different in a lot of ways, but if you kind of have a first principles draw towards the things that I mentioned, like, you are missing out on the fire of the gods if you are missing out on Montessori. Like, if you see Montessori as a kind of like progressive anarchic playscape, you're missing out on her writings. You're missing out on the possibility to visit great schools and to check them out. And not all Montessori schools are equal. The Montessori brand is not patented. Every Montessorian will tell you, like, Montessorians hearing this are like, no, like, they'll go and visit a Montessori school that sucks and that is like just a kind of crappy place. I'm not saying that they're all great, but just in principle, the approach has tools and resources that you just cannot find anywhere else, pedagogical, curricular, and philosophical, that I think are worth looking at. And so check out a local Montessori school, read The Discovery of the Child, which is Montessori's book, where she kind of gives her account of like how she came up with this and gives an outline of kind of what the method looks like and what some of the materials look like. If you're homeschooling, Dr. Montessori's own handbook goes through the curriculum for early childhood. There are other books with the math curriculum for elementary and whatnot. There are lots and lots and lots of YouTube videos. There's lots of resources. So I would just say, like if you're a roofer, you want a nail gun. Like, and if you're an educator of this age range, anywhere in this age range, like, you want Montessori.
Love it. Thank you both for coming on. We kind of framed this as like setting the record straight for a Montessori, and I think it's awesome. I think people are going to listen to this, and I think it's going to inspire a lot of debate and discussion. Very similar, I feel like, to there was a Morningside Academy episode. There was the Michaela Community School episode. There's been some episodes of school models that have really inspired people and given them a chance to kind of rethink their priors. So I really do appreciate that. Listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to Progressively Incorrect. If you could spread this around and give it that 5-star review, as you always do, I would really appreciate it. It's just me and a mic in my attic, and I'm just enjoying every moment of this discussion. I look forward to this every time I record. Matt, Laura, thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you.
It was great.